Okay, so my talk is really just an introduction into responsive design, what it is, how it fits into design in general, why we should be concerned with it, and why we should think it's important, and finally show you some examples of it being used in the real world. So the first thing is, what exactly is responsive design? It's a term that seems to be used a lot nowadays, but it actually means different things to different people. So initially, responsive design was a phrase coined by a designer called Ethan Marcotte in an article on a list of parts, and it explained using flexible grids and percentage layouts to give users different displays based on their device width. Now, what we actually take responsive design to mean is slightly different. Ethan was talking about responsive layout, as we understand it, and there's adaptive layout, which adaptive uses more kind of fixed-based widths and then breakpoints to change the display based on the screen size, whereas responsive layout resizes as the browser resizes. So we kind of feel that responsive design is a combination of both of these techniques put together, so we can use fluid and fixed widths together along with breakpoints. Where this turns into adaptive design, which is a more encompassing design term, is when you use techniques like progressive enhancement to enhance what the user sees based on what their device is capable of doing. So, for example, you may have a Google map on your website where the progressive enhancement would sniff out whether that device can use GPS, and then instead of just showing the users, showing your location, would show the user's location as well, and perhaps give directions on top of just a location point. So, like, why do we need it? I mean, smartphone use and tablet use has massively increased over the last 2-3 years, and we're seeing more and more people use devices like iPads, Android tablets, and things like that. So we're not just stuck on a desktop world. We need to use techniques to display sites in a way that suits these platforms as well. So there's one interesting stat here that by summer 2013, it's estimated that there will be more devices running the Android operating system than Windows by the next summer. So that stresses how important this is. As Daniel mentioned, last year's kind of buzzwords were, should we use a mobile app or a mobile site? But I think responsive design actually gives us an opportunity to use a single code base and use a single website across a multitude of devices. So without further ado, I think I'll jump into a couple of examples here. The first of which is the Boston Globe, which is the kind of poster boy of, or actually I have this Anderson Wise, which is a great example of a really nice looking responsive site. So if we just resize the browser here, we can see how the display actually changes as we get smaller and smaller. So we hit a breakpoint at a certain size, and it actually uses separate CSS to display the site in a different format. And then again, we go down lower and lower and lower. And you can see the responsiveness is the fact that things like images actually resize as the browser gets smaller. So this is one single site, one single code base, and it's working across multiple devices. The Boston Globe is a really good example, and it actually was designed in conjunction with Ethan Marcotte, who came up with the phrase. And we can see things like the navigation in the very top left corner. We can see things like that changing to make it more suitable for the size of device that we're on. So as we get smaller and smaller, we see the display change. Things like navigation, things like the weather symbol and things like that move around. So it's just a really good example of how to use the same content but reformat it so it's suitable for the device. Smashing Magazine is also a great example. Actually has 5 different breakpoints within this design. So they've really thought about things like where the social media icon should go, how big the logo should be, the size of typography and things like that, just to make sure that whatever device, whatever size of screen the user's using, they get the best experience possible. So you can see all the way down to mobile. And the final example we have is actually a client of ours, Lancaster, with their award-winning responsive design, which shows an example of going all the way down to mobile and being able to reformat the same content again. So there are a few things that you need to consider when you're embarking on a responsive design project. The first of which, it can be a more agile approach to design. It's almost impossible to get everything right in the design phase. You can't, without spending a huge amount of time, you can't cover all the bases. So it's more of an agile approach in the fact that certain things get done as the code is written. But you can cover a lot of bases as you're doing the design if you give enough time to it. That leads on to the second point, that it is an increased design time. Generally can be, depending on the amount of different breakpoints and how much you need to change the display, it can be kind of 20 to 30% increase in design time. And the third is don't be afraid of your constraints. You should see them as an opportunity to actually refactor the content and make it the best content for the specific use. As Claire kind of covered, it can be a great opportunity to actually look at your content and reconsider what that content should be and make it the most useful. There are some common pitfalls, however, one of which can be just hiding content for mobile. We generally wouldn't recommend this, as mobile users should be getting the same level of interaction with their site as a desktop user is. So rather than just hiding content, we would recommend that you actually think of refactoring it or making sure it works on a smaller device. You should always consider page size. One of the examples when I was researching this was Barack Obama's website. He actually has one page that's 4 megabytes to download, and if you're on a smartphone, on a 3G network or even an edge network, this just isn't ever going to work, and in fact will probably crash the browser. So again, it's another opportunity to consider the page content on your existing sites as well and make sure that these load fast and are optimized for the web. One of the dangers of not responsive, but adaptive, is using specific dimensions and targeting just those dimensions. Now, responsive takes care of a lot of this by using percentage widths. So you're not necessarily designing for specific sizes, and that kind of covers that one off. So the fourth point can be ignoring context. Sometimes when you're designing a site, you don't think about the actual context that page is being viewed on. Now, it's not 100% important, because sometimes you might have a user using a mobile site, but they could still be sitting down at their desk. So you should put too much focus on that, but it's always important to consider and use if it's possible. And then you shouldn't miss an opportunity to make a user's life easier. So take advantage of the features of the device. Like if they have GPS, use it if it's going to make the user's life a lot easier. So I think I'd probably hand on. Is there any questions? Go.
Is it possible to retrofit a website, or are you effectively talking about starting from scratch in the design process?
It is possible, but it's a very difficult journey compared to, it probably is easier to refactor your design. So what you can do is almost go back to the design stage and almost refactor the code to fit a more responsive layout. Doesn't necessarily mean redesigning the entire site, but to retrofit code on top of fixed width layouts can be problematic, yeah.
Thank you. Can you just say a little bit more about what you mean by embracing the constraints? There was a slide that you had there, and you talk about embrace the constraints.
It's more just that it's a way of rethinking your content. So if your content is, lengthy pages and things like that, when you think about how a mobile user is going to view that page, then it's embracing the constraint that you only have a small screen to work on. So rethinking the content to be best suited for that particular user on that size.
If I can just add to that, I think a good example, sorry, I'm sort of hiding behind a pillar here because I don't want to go too close to the speaker because I'll deafen you all. I think a good example of that is actually with Amazon on their mobile version. If you look at the product descriptions cut off ... because they have said, oh well, people on mobile aren't interested in long descriptions, so they actually physically just put ... and you might know what the product is. So I think it's about not just, and I think this fits in with the whole repurposing of your existing content. Like, is that content suitable for somebody who's trying to use it on a mobile device, or do you need to create like a short form version of it that could be usable on the mobile?